This is going to be a little less structured than what we normally do. So we're going to be writing by the seat of our pants on this. For those of you that don't know Robert Nuddleman, well, my first question is, how is it you can't know Robert Nuddleman here? He's an employment attorney, and I know a favorite of PFAC folks here, because as a PFAC member myself, I know whenever anything comes up with employment, almost always they're going to say, well, I heard Robert say this and Robert say that and all that. So, and once again, a lot of what Robert does, and we'll turn this over to him in a minute, but one of the things that he does do is that he counsels a lot of fiduciaries on different employment issues. And he also did, for those of you that are looking for something with MCLE credit, he did a program for us like about 6 months ago, and I know it's very well attended here, and on just the basics of employment, especially when you have, for instance, employees, that you have caregivers and that kind of thing, and I know that was really well received. So Robert, I'm going to turn this over to you for now. Once again, I would say for the folks that are online here, well, Robert, what is your normal billable rate here?
For PFAC members, I give a discount. It's usually between $350 and $400, depending on what I, if I like them or not. No, it just depends on the scope of the work.
Okay, well, that'd be a little.
No, but it's all free today, so that's all that matters.
That's the thing, ask the man the questions, because once again, the billing machine is often less. Although if you do want to go ahead and pay him anyway, send your PFAC number so you can get your discount. Right?
And even if it's today we're going to be talking about working from home, telecommuting, and some of the things to consider. And if you have questions that are not directly related to telecommuting, that's fine. In fact, I had a couple of people actually send me a couple of emails with some questions ahead of time. We'll kind of work those in there as I go. But yeah, use that Q&A feature. If that's not working for you for some reason, you could use the chat feature, or you can raise your hand and we can try and figure it out from that way. We'll get it going. So I represent a lot of employers, and prior to COVID-19, some of them had employees that telecommuted for various reasons. After the shelter in place, a lot of people had to do the telecommuting. Employees, unless you were an essential business and the work was essential, the employers didn't have a choice but to either lay them off, furlough them, or allow them to telecommute. Even if you were considered an essential business, they really wanted you to have the people telecommute unless they couldn't. So kind of my first question is, well, why would employees want to work from home? Right now, the easy answer is, well, the COVID-19 and the shelter in place, there was a requirement that we put everybody in home that we can to limit the exposure. But even before this, there were other instances. Oftentimes, somebody might have a medical condition or disability that required some type of an accommodation. Those accommodations sometimes would include telecommute or working from home, either a part-time or a full-time basis. Some people it's a personal choice. They feel like, hey, we can do this, so let me do it. I think employers traditionally felt like, hey, I need my employees in the workspace so I can keep an eye on them, make sure they're doing work. And so they're pretty limited as to when they would allow telecommuting or working from home. I think one of the nice things that's happened as a result of so many people working from home now is employers are starting to realize, well, this is actually more of a viable option than ever it was before. Sometimes now I think there's going to be more employers who are choosing to, let's do this telecommuting home. When you think about the cost of leasing space, if your employees can be successful working out of their homes, maybe we don't need to incur that big expense. I know I have a friend of mine who works for Google, and Google's parents said, yeah, we're thinking until the end of the year, most employees are probably going to be working from home. And they've outfitted everybody with the internet connections and the computers and everything that they need. And there are a large majority of people are very successful at working at home. There are some that are not. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Identifying, though, the reason why somebody is going to be working from home is the first step, because we have to differentiate between a personal request by the employee, personal request by the employer, or something that is legally required. Again, right now we have the COVID-19, so that most people are required to do that unless they're an essential worker. The other one that comes in is if somebody needs it as an accommodation for a medical condition. If that comes up, if my employee says, hey, I need to be able to work from home, part-time, full-time, whatever it is, because of a medical condition, we probably want to get a little bit more information. We're going to need to find out information. What does the doctor actually recommend? I do recommend reach out, give me a call if that comes up, because there's a little bit of a landmine. We don't have a right to ask about somebody's invade their privacy and get a diagnosis or a prognosis. We can ask that they provide us sufficient information so that we can determine whether we can provide the accommodation, whether or not they really need it. But we should not be talking directly with the doctors. We should be relying on the employee to provide the information whenever possible and have a conversation on what is it you need? Is this a full-time? Is this a part-time? So we can decide, is this something we're going to have to do? A question I'm getting quite frequently now as businesses are starting to reopen is, hey, I never used to let employees work from home. I had to do it from now because of shelter in place. What do I do if an employee now says, hey, I want to be able to work from home? Because it was somewhat difficult for an employee to successfully argue that working from home is an appropriate accommodation for a medical condition, except in pretty limited situations. And it was pretty easy for an employer to show, well, this really is not reasonable, and this creates an undue burden because we need you to be here in the office. Many jobs, their essential functions are to be in office with other people. And the employees can argue now, hey, I've just been doing my job successfully for 3 months. In fact, you've been telling me, sending me emails about what a great job I'm doing. Now I want to be able to do this on a more permanent basis, either it's a disability or for personal reasons. If it's for personal reasons, I'm less concerned about it. But if it's for medical reasons, we have to go through that process of determining whether or not they need this as a reasonable accommodation. The mere fact that you were required to allow the employees to work from home during the shelter in place does not mean that that is always going to be a reasonable accommodation for a disability. In fact, for a lot of people, I'm allowing you to work from home. I know you're not going to be as productive, but I'm trying to keep you fully employed. Maybe it's because I've got a PPP loan or other loans that I want to be able to have some portion of that forgiven, or I just want to try and help people as much. So I'm willing to forgive the lack of productivity or where you're not as productive. But that's not on a full-time position that we're going to do that. So when there's a number of different considerations, and each employer will probably have their own individual considerations, but it's kind of the top ones that I like to look at. Number one is, can this job, as it's designed, can it actually be done remotely? There are some jobs that you can't. You're not going to be an HVAC technician and be able to do that from your house. You're going to actually have to go out to people's homes. You may need to do certain things that require in-office presence, whether it's managing meetings or having access to documents or access to servers, hardware, things like that, that just this job cannot be performed remotely. Even if the job can be done remotely, we have to question whether or not this particular employee can perform the job remotely. Each of us have our own strengths, and I may be able to work effectively at home, but you may not be able to. my family situation might be such that, okay, it's very chaotic, and so I can't get stuff done when I'm at home. Your situation may be different. You can have the privacy necessary. And then there are just people with different personalities that, yes, I'm a self-motivator, or I'm not a self-motivator. I need somebody to be overseeing me. So we want to be asking, is this the type of person that can do the job remotely? There's also a question, is this going to be a temporary situation, or is this going to be permanent? I don't like permanent pretty much for anything. For me, even if it's an accommodation for a disability where somebody needs some time off or needs to be able to work from home, I want to revisit that on a periodic basis, because we don't know, circumstances can change, the job position might change, et cetera. So we want to make sure that they can, we're reviewing it, whether it's every 3 months or every 6 months. I'm going to share with you a nice, let's see, I'm going to continue that one. If I can find the right one, yeah. This is a nice, hopefully you guys are seeing my telecommuting request checklist.
That's what I see.
Okay, good, then I did it right. So this actually comes from the Cal Chamber. It's not something I created, but I think it's pretty helpful, and I'm happy to email this out to people if they need it. This is kind of a checklist and things that you can go through when you're trying to decide whether or not you can allow it. Again, can this person do the job effectively? Do they have that skills? Are they self-motivated? So you're looking at what can the employee do as a person individually, can they do it? Just to give you some ideas. You also have to look at, is this job going to require face-to-face contact? A lot of the rules, and certainly any of the cases that talk about working from home, are from a while ago. So we didn't have the technology that we have today. I know a lot of people are using Zoom to do their conferences. And let's see, how do I get over here? So yeah, a lot of people are using Zoom or other online services, and there were some issues in the beginning about Zoom meetings. Were they secure enough? Were they not secure enough? Zoom made some modifications. Some of the other Blue Jeans, some of the other companies that offer it have also made some adjustments to make it a little bit safer to do. But it is somewhat new technology that people are still struggling with to figure out, how do we do this? How do we not do it? What's the best way to go? So my recommendation, if we've decided, yes, we're going to allow this employee to work from home, I like to start with, if it's coming from the employee, then we really want to have that employee do a request form. Again, I'm going to share another file. This one is, again, from the Cal Chamber. This is the telecommuting request. This is when it's coming from the employee, where they can put down, why are they wanting this? Is this going to benefit the company? How is it? Is this something they're going to do 5 days a week, 2 days a week? What's the schedule going to be? So the employee can kind of think about, how are we going to do this? How am I going to be able to do my job? How do I think through, how am I going to do my effective communications? Quite frankly, I know a lot of companies that even the people who are in the office, they're not visiting face-to-face for the most part. They're talking over the phone, they're going through email or Slack. I think this is a pretty decent form for employers to consider adopting. One of the things I really like about it is this about what kind of equipment do you need to effectively communicate? Because that's an issue that we need to think about in general. When we're going to be, get rid of this one, hold on. Sorry. There we go. Is what kind of equipment? So first of all, employers are required to indemnify or reimburse employees when they incur expenses in the discharge of their duties or at the direction of the employer. So what does that mean? So normally, if you're in the office, I'm paying for a phone, I'm paying for email, you're already using my internet, you have your computers here, but now you want to work at home, the employer may still be obligated to pay for that. And this is, again, where it makes a difference if the request is coming from the employee for personal reasons, for a disability, or from the employer. If I, as the employer, am requiring you to work from home, then I am obligated to pay for your share of the internet, pay for your share of the phone, provide the equipment, all those things that I have to do in a normal office, I still have those same obligations. If the employee is asking for the ability to work from home just as a convenience to them, because maybe they don't want to have to commute, whatever, then you may not have to, because those are not expenses that are incurred in the discharge of their duties, because the employee has the option of coming in to work. For the shelter in place, because that was mandated by the government, we've been advising employers, no, it's your responsibility to provide that cost, whatever the share of the internet or the phone, et cetera, that would come in, you should be paying for that. One thing that people don't oftentimes think about is travel time, particularly for an hourly employee. Normally, if I have an employee who comes to the office and now is working at the office and I have to send the employee to a client or somewhere else, I'm paying him for that travel time. I'm not paying him to travel to the office, but I am paying him to travel to the different sites after he gets to the first place, after he gets to the office. Same thing applies now, but now when he's leaving from his home, since the home is a primary office, I'm having to pay him as soon as he leaves his house for work purposes. I have to pay him for that time. It also means I'm hopefully paying for mileage as well. So those are just some of the things to consider. A lot of employers ask, well, how much do I pay for internet? How much do I pay for phone? It depends. First of all, I think you are better off having employees, if you give your employee a work phone and have them use that. I would rather you do that than have the employees use their personal phone, because part of it is control and the other is finances. And you can get phone plans pretty inexpensively now with unlimited talk and text to make that fairly simple. There was a case a couple years ago where a salesman had to use his personal phone to call clients. Although he had an unlimited data and unlimited talk and text plan, the court still said that the employer has to pay the pro rata share of the cost. Even though he had that plan before he started working, and actually in this particular case, he didn't even pay the bill. It was on his girlfriend's phone line, but still the California court said, no, he's having to use his phone, you're requiring him to use his phone, so you have to pay for a portion of it. So technically the right way to do it would be take the total dollar amount that it costs to have the phone for the use of the line, divide it out between personal and work, and employer pays for the work. I don't think anybody realistically is going to do that. I think the better way to do it is to come up with a reasonable amount and identify, hey, we're going to pay X, $20 a month, $30 a month, whatever it is. If your actual costs are more than that, then provide us your bill, show us the personal versus work, and we'll come up with the pro rata amount. I do the same thing with the phone. I would do the same thing with the internet. Again, it does make a difference if this is at the employee's request versus this is at the employer's request. So what are those expenses that we're going to have to cover? I would want you to come up with a policy, have something in place so that they know, well, what they're going to get paid, what they're not going to get paid when they're doing it. So there was a question, somebody did have a question about related to this, where the employee has a work cell phone and the company says, use your work cell phone, but this employee insists on giving out her personal cell phone and using both her personal phone and her work phone. Well, because the company provides the work cell phone, you don't have to pay for the personal cell phone because we've already provided you a phone. But more importantly, my issue would be, I want the employee to use the work phone, because if that employee is no longer my employee, they quit or they're fired, I want to have control of the phone number. I don't want my clients calling my employees on their personal phone because I can't control that. There's also an issue of, particularly if this is an hourly employee, are they answering their phones after hours when they shouldn't be? And that's a point to keep in mind is, if you're allowing people to work from home, and even if you're not, you should have a policy telling people that they should not be answering their phones after hours. Unless they're required to do work after hours, I prefer, look, you want to start time and you want to stop time. It's real easy for us to meld those hours together and, oh, I'm just going to answer this email even though it's 7 o'clock at night. Well, those are hours worked and you have to pay for those. So we do have a question about what if we pay for a phone app that gives them the work phone number on their personal phone. I think that's fine. So essentially, like I have Google Voice, for example, and I can publish that out. I own that Google Voice number, but I can forward that to wherever. Or actually, technically, with my voice over IP phone, I can go ahead and forward that phone to whoever I want. So if they put extension 100 right now, it goes to my cell phone. If they do extension 150, it goes to my bookkeeper's cell phone. That solves the problem of them giving out their personal cell phone number, but it doesn't solve the problem of people using their phone after hours for work, which we have to pay for, and they are still having to use their own cell phone, which you would then have to reimburse them for that expense. I know my voice over IP phone, I set it up so that after 5 o'clock, the phone does not forward to people's emails. It goes into the voicemail. And the same thing if it's before 8:30. So I can somewhat control that, so there's no reason they should be getting calls. But then I have other employers that have on-call employees, and they need to be on call. And those are some special situations that we have to be pretty kind of specific about. Just to follow up on another question somebody sent me via email was, oh, by the way, so how would I handle the issue of somebody who insists on using their phone, even though I've given them a company phone? I would tell them, don't. We've given you a phone for a reason. That's the phone you should be giving out. You should not be giving out your personal phone. Please stop doing that. If they continue to do it, then we move it up from just a little verbal warning. Hey, I've warned you about this before. Now we're having to, give you a formal written warning about this. And we actually discipline them. And we appreciate your diligence then that you want to be available, but it's also important that we have a clear communication channel, and that means the calls are supposed to go through our business lines. Most employees, hopefully, are gonna follow those directions. Because again, there's a question about, if I pay somebody a salary, does that cover all of their hours? No. Most employees are entitled to overtime if they work more than 8 hours in a day or 40 hours in a week. If they are paid a salary and they are exempt from the overtime laws, then you don't have to pay them. But to be exempt, it's not just paying a salary. It's paying a salary, plus they have to spend most of their time performing exempt duties. So like an attorney is an exempt employee. There's like 7 different specifically stated professionals, attorneys, accountants, doctors, certain engineers. Then there are people that are in charge of supervising 2 or more people, and they have the authority to hire and fire. And then there's administrative exemptions. So there's a number of different exemptions that could apply, but just because I pay them a salary does not mean that they're exempt from overtime. In fact, unless they are exempt from overtime, I would not pay them a salary, because paying them a salary does not compensate them for any of the overtime. In fact, we've actually been able to use this shelter in place for a couple of clients to make some pretty necessary changes. You might have an employee that normally is an exempt employee, but because they supervise people and they're doing other exempt duties that they cannot do while they're sheltering in place. Because they can't spend most of their time performing exempt duties while they're doing the shelter in place, they're no longer exempt. We actually change them from salary to hourly. Now when it's time to bring them back, we can reevaluate, you know what, maybe we want to keep them as hourly. Maybe we want to change what their job duties are. We're finding that it's not necessary for you to do X, Y, and Z, so we're not going to have you do that. There can be complications in that, so again, use counsel before switching somebody from hourly to salary, et cetera, or going from salary to hourly. Professional fiduciaries, I've had the question is, are professional fiduciaries exempt from overtime? Not necessarily. Just because you have a license doesn't mean you are exempt. It kind of depends on what a job title in and of itself doesn't make you exempt. It is, what are you spending your time doing? You have to go through the analysis. Are you exercising discretion and independent judgment about matters of consequence? A lower level, newer fiduciary is not going to be functioning at the level of somebody who's been doing it a while. So there can be a spectrum. And it is also an area that a lot of people make a lot of mistakes on. So if you have questions on that area, as always, feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to help out if I can. I want to talk a little bit about technology. As I mentioned, we have a wealth of technology that makes things a lot easier. But when I'm going to have you work from home, some things I may not think about, scanners, fax machines. Well, I don't know if anybody faxes anymore, but do I have to have a scanner? Do I have to have a printer? If you don't have this on your phone or your iPad, you should get it. There's a free app, Adobe Scanner. Let me look it up. Hold on. I use it all the time at home, although I have a scanner at home. Adobe Scan. It's a free one, and you just take a picture of it, but it saves it as a PDF. And if you take a picture of 5 files, it's not 5 documents, it's not 5 separate documents. It integrates it all into a single one, and you can email it. I really like that as a nice, cheap, easy solution, so I don't have to feed things through a scanner. I try to be as much digital, as many of my things on a digital platform as possible.
So Robert, in a case like that, you need to do that on the company phone, or can you do that on your personal phone?
The same kind of rule applies as I said before. If you are giving them a company phone, you have it doing it on the company phone. That's always the better option anyways, because then you can control things a little bit more. If you can allow them to do it on their phone, but any work they're doing on their phone, even quite frankly, if they're checking their email on their phone, arguably you have to reimburse that employee for the use of their personal phone. That's why I like the idea of, hey, what's your phone bill? Okay, your phone, you're paying $80 a month or $40 a month. We'll pay half of that for considering it for work. And if they say, well, I think it should be more like 2/3 of it, okay, then we'll pay 2/3 of it. I mean, at some point in time, what I recommend is, okay, go to Click Wireless or Sprint or whatever it is, and figure out, if I were to order 4 phones for unlimited talk text, what's that going to charge me? Probably going to be $100 for 4 phones. So if I've got 4 employees, I'd rather pay that $100 to Sprint and just give them phones than reimburse people all individually anyways.
So is it more or less a reasonable standard?
Yeah, it is. They don't use the word reasonable in the statute, but that's what the courts look at, is this a reasonable? So like, for example, if I send you have to go to this conference, or you have to go stay in a hotel. Well, you could get a room at the Hyatt for $150 or a room at the Ritz for $350. Even if you get the room at the Ritz, I don't have to pay that if it's not reasonable for you to stay at the Ritz. You should have stayed at the Hyatt, and I'm only going to reimburse you for $150. When you're allowing people to work at home, we want to think about how frequently and how do we want to communicate with them. Are we going to have daily phone conferences? Are we going to have weekly phone conferences? Are they going to be sending me updates in the morning, in the evening? How are they going to be tracking their time, particularly for the hourly employees? They still need to track the time. So are they going to be writing it down on a sheet of paper and faxing that in, or scanning it in, or sending an email, or however we decide to do? You want to think that through. How do we want that process to go? Again, there are apps for just about anything nowadays, so you can certainly get those apps. For phones, hopefully they all integrate, particularly if you have a mixed workforce, some Apple people and some Android. That can sometimes make those cross-platform issues problematic.
So, Robert, this is probably a dumb question, but but once again, we still need to enforce breaks and lunch or whatever, or because you're not at home. I mean, because you're at home, it really doesn't matter, or which I know that's never the answer, but.
Yeah, no, it does matter, and you have less control over it. So I have some employees in different industries that don't have control over when the employees take their breaks because they're out. Like cleaning, I have a couple of house cleaner companies, and the employees are out. We can't really force them to take breaks. We can schedule things so that they can be sure that they have enough time to do it, but I can't force them. Same thing applies at home. I can't force you to stop and take a break. There are a couple things we can do. One, we want to have a policy, just our normal policy. It says you get a 10-minute paid rest break for every 4-hour block. You get a half-hour unpaid lunch break. We want you to be clocking out for that lunch break. I actually tell my clients, tell your employees that particularly if they're working on a computer, they should be standing up at least once an hour and getting away from that computer. It's going to help with their eyes. You're going to have less workers' comp injuries. You're going to help with the carpal tunnel. So let's get them up even more frequently. So you're telling them, hey, take that break. I know you're busy, but set an alarm so that in 2 hours, it's going to remind you to stand up and walk away, or every hour it's going to remind you to get up and do something different. We really want them to take those breaks so that they will be more focused. And by you telling them, take these breaks, when they later come back and say, I could not take the break, we have a better defense. Employers aren't required to force their employees to take a break, but they are required to afford the employees the opportunity to take a break. And in the last 10 years, I don't think I've seen an employment lawsuit that didn't include missed meal break claims, missed meal and rest break claims. They're always in there, whether or not they're valid or not. So we want to make those policies. Speaking of policies, what about workplace posters? You know, when you come into work, you go into the employee break room, you got that nice, huge old poster there. You got the wage order. Well, if I'm working at home, that is a workplace. And yes, they still have to have all the workplace posters. So you could...
What, put it on the refrigerator?
Yeah, you can make them put it up there. I opt to, you can get them in PDF format. So, and I've got some collection, you got to kind of update them. And the other thing is you have city-specific ones too. So my office is in Pleasanton, but I have an employee who lives in Berkeley. I've got to get the Berkeley posters for that person. Luckily, you can get them all for free. You can get them through Cal Chambers, also a nice, easy place to get it. And I like you get it as a PDF and you say, hey, here it is. Please post this in the workplace. They put it in a binder. I don't care what they do. You've at least done what you had to do. That does bring you to an issue about some safety issues. Because this is a workspace, OSHA and workers' comp rules still apply. This one, yeah, there we go. So this is a telecommuting safety checklist that employers can go through with the employee to make sure things are safe. Now, you can see how long this was, because it starts off with questions about asbestos, but that is still a question it's good to ask. You know, do we have a bunch of lead-based paint around? Do we got asbestos? Allows the employee to think about, what does my workspace look like? I would encourage employers to have employees have a designated workspace. You know, do I have a quiet place I can do the work? Can I close a door? Do I not? So we can at least have an understanding of what to expect. Most of the time, the employee is going to be kind of pro forma, and the employer is going to check, yes, all these things are fine. Yes, all these things are fine. That's good. That's what we want. That way we can put this in our files. We've done our diligence of asking the employee to make sure these things are all safe. If somebody says it's not safe, then we have to evaluate, okay, well, do we still want to allow them to use, to be able to work from home if they're not able to provide a safe workplace? I think not. I think we want them, if the workplace is not safe, we don't want them there because, again, OSHA does apply. Not that OSHA is going to come by, but if somebody gets injured, we're going to run into issues. Speaking of injuries, your workers' compensation insurance should cover any injuries that occur while the employee is performing work in the home. I would, however, double check with your insurance broker or your insurance agent. Say, hey, I do have an employee who's telecommuting. I want to make sure that employee is covered. Sometimes they're going to want to put that address in there. Sometimes the insurance company may have their own version of the safety checklist that they want to have adopted. What do you think? What can we do to make things as safe as possible and ensure that there is coverage in case of an accident. One big issue, particularly with fiduciaries, is confidentiality. How do we ensure that the information our clients are bringing home is staying confidential? And you need to have that conversation with the employee. So if you're like me, most of my stuff is digital, so I can access it. I've got a secure, I use Dropbox, it's 256-bit encrypted. It's secure. You can't get onto my computer without password or my finger. You can't get on my phone without the password. So you can't access any of it unless you have passwords. So it's protected in that respect. Some people, you could go even further and think, okay, do I need to have an IT person come out to the home and make sure that their internet is locked down? I don't know if I'd go that far, but I would certainly ask the employee, what are you doing for your internet? Do you have a public Wi-Fi? Is it private? We want to make sure that something is set up so it's private and not everybody has access to the stuff. If you're using physical documents, how do we want those documents to be transported and maintained at the home? If I have kids running around, is it okay that I have a box full of confidential medical information regarding my client? Probably not. So maybe we want to invest in an easy box that they can carry, and everything stays in that document. When they're not working on it, it goes back in the document. Having those conversations to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to protect the confidentiality of any of those documents that we might have. We want to have that conversation about what our expectations are regarding the productivity. Whether this is on a temporary basis or a more permanent basis, what is the company's expectations? What's the employer's expectations? And how are we going to measure that? My productivity at home may be the same. For me, it's kind of billable hours. For you, it might be billable hours, or it might be how many sales calls have you made, or how many social media posts have you made, or how many times have you worked out the clients, and how do you track that? I think that weekly meetings at a minimum are good to track on, hey, what are we doing? What are our progress? One issue that comes up frequently, even not necessarily in telecommuting, but just in general is, well, my employee, I don't think that they're working all the hours that they should be. I'm paying an hourly employee, and they're just not putting in enough hours. Well, for hourly employees, it's a little bit easier because you can ask the question, hey, what are you doing? Because if I'm paying you hourly, you should be working that whole time. Salaried exempt employees, it's a much more difficult question, because the idea of a salary is whether you work 10 hours or 100 hours in a week, I'm going to pay you the same amount. So it really should be about productivity. So for a salaried exempt employee, I'm not asking, what are you spending your time doing necessarily, other than as a way to measure how are you being productive. I want to be looking at the end result. Are you supposed to be having 13 TPS reports done every single day, and I'm only getting 5 out of you? Or you're supposed to be talking with 6 clients a day, you're only talking to 2. Let's look at the underlying performance objective, not the how many hours are you logging or how many hours are you not logging. If you are paying somebody on an hourly basis and you think that they're including time, yes, I've logged into the computer and I'm sitting there, so technically I'm working, but I'm also watching Teen Titans Go with my children. Then we have to have that conversation. Hey, you're not being as productive. When you were in the office, you were getting X amount of work done in a normal 8-hour day. Now you're getting half of that. What's going on that we can do? Is there something we can do differently? Is there something that we can change that will allow you to be more productive? And if there's not, then it may be okay. Well, then sometimes we may need to change the hours. Okay, my kids are awake from 8 o'clock. Well, I have teenagers. My kids are awake from noon until midnight. So maybe I set my work hours are going to be from 6 a.m. to noon. It's a shorter day, but I'm doing it before everybody else is in the wake when things are getting hectic around my house. Or maybe I'm going to work a couple hours in the morning, work a couple hours in the afternoon and a couple hours in the evening. Those kinds of flexibility, particularly now that there are some required shelters in place, it may be necessary to ensure that we have the appropriate level of productivity.
You know, this may be obvious, but maybe we can go over that again because, you know, I'll tell you both at the Golden State Pool Trust and the Dale Law Firm, the majority of our staff are working at home, and we've actually been very pleased that productivity actually has gone up, right? And all of that. But one of the things that I guess we're adjusting to, and I guess it's just the nature of working at home, is that you can break it up, right? I mean, normally when you come into the office, you're doing your 8-hour stretch, but there's nothing wrong, as I understand it, with breaking up the workday.
Yeah, in fact, there's one of the questions in the chat room that I just saw. Are our hourly employees allowed to spread their 40-hour work week over 7 days or over in a single day? Yes and no. Certainly over the day, they can, if they are having control of their hours, they can work an hour here, take a 2-hour break, work a half hour, take a break, etc. If the employer is mandating that, we run into issues of whether or not this is a split shift. In other words, if I am telling you, you will work from 9 a.m. to 12, and then you're going to come back and you're going to work from 3 to 6, that's essentially a split shift. It really is only an issue if you're paying minimum wage or, you know, so low that it doesn't cover, but that can be an issue. Spreading it over multiple days, like it may be, okay, look, Monday through Friday is not very, I'm not as productive, but Saturday and Sunday, I can be very productive. So maybe we switch out those days. For overtime, the basic overtime rules are you get overtime if you work more than 8 hours in a day or 40 in a week, and for the first 8 hours on the 7th consecutive day. So even if I work 2 hours a day, if I'm working on that 7th consecutive day in the work week, those 2 hours are going to be at the overtime rate because I'm working 7 days in a row. So whenever possible, you always want to say, look, I don't care, you pick whatever day you want, but you really need to take that. You need at least 1 day off. We don't want people working 7 days in a row. There are certain exceptions. There's like personal attendants that I do a lot of work with, caregivers and stuff. That rule doesn't apply to them. And if the people are exempt from overtime, and if there are people like irrigators and sheep herders and camp counselors can work 7 days in a row, and ski lift operators too, but there's all sorts of weird exemptions for those. But generally speaking, don't have them work more than 6 days in a row. If we can work with a flexible schedule, then let's work with a flexible schedule. But let's set those expectations. So one of the things that I like to do is I do think that you should have at least either a telecommuting agreement or a telecommuting policy, something that kind of sets out what is our expectations. Again, this is a very simple one from the Cal Chamber. I refer a lot to the Cal Chamber stuff just because I think they do a really good job. If you're not a member of Cal Chamber, it's fairly inexpensive. It's like $470 a year, and you get access to all this stuff. If you're one of my clients, then you just give me a call and I'll grab you whatever you need. Don't tell the Cal Chamber I said that though. So this is just kind of saying, hey, look, I understand that I'm still, obligated to maintain all the same company policies. I can't engage in sexual harassment. I did have a client that had to remind employees that just because you're on a Zoom meeting doesn't mean we can't tell that you're in the bathroom. So, go ahead and stop the meeting and come back. It's fine to just, if you want to do top up, I'm dressed professionally, but I got shorts on underneath, that's fine. But please at least wear shorts. Come up with what are those requirements? What are the things that you're going to want them to do? This one is saying what is the schedule going to be? If you're going to have certain reports or requirements or things that you're going to want them to do on a weekly basis, hey, we're going to be having our weekly meeting and you're in charge of setting that up, or whatever it is. Let's put that into the agreement. Let's put that so that the expectations are clear. It's really about being as clear ahead of time and being willing to adjust those as necessary, because some things may change. This one I also like because it does include, hey, this is equipment that I'm giving to you. Here, I'm giving you this laptop so you can take home. We get that back. Don't put it, you got to let us know what the passwords are so that we can put those in there. Where, are they going to be using email or text messages? How are they going to be communicating? And then what are the specific costs that we're going to cover? So I think it's a pretty bare bones agreement, but I think it's a good one just to see. Even though it's fairly bare bones, I still think it's a good one to use.
And I know that's what we're using. So, so going back to this, I guess I'm a little hung up on the 7 days a week. What I'm getting out of what you're telling me is you can spread it out over 6 here, but when you go to day 7, you're in overtime city.
For the hourly employees, yeah.
Right. Okay, which is good.
I'm trying to
And then, of course, this is something the employer, or correct me if I'm wrong, the employer and the employee negotiate. It's not necessarily a right.
As far as the flexibility of the hours?
Yeah.
Yeah, the only exception might be if they need a flexibility as an accommodation for a medical condition. Somebody has asked for a copy of these forms. I'll send them to you, Dale, and then people can reach out to you directly, Dale, and get copies of these forms that I was showing people in case they want to use them. I'm happy to share those.
Now let me mention this as an administrative thing. This is an open forum, so we're not giving credit today, but you're getting some pretty good advice. So I'm not feeling bad for anybody who's not getting credit. The other one is for those of you that are watching on Facebook here, and for those of you that are not, to get these really cool materials, you want to email amy@gspt.org. Okay, so amy@gspt.org. We're done with that. Anyway.
In fact, I should probably just do that. Amy, here, I'm going to do these.
Yeah, don't send it to me because God knows where it's going to end up. So.
And Amy, I just sent them over to you so that you can distribute them to people who need them. And there are other resources that are out there. I just, like I say, my Benefit Mall is my payroll agency, at least for the moment now, and they've got some good stuff through their HR 360 that's good. ADP and Paychecks probably have their own versions. I'm a little leery on some of their stuff, so I want to make sure whatever you're using is California specific, because California is California. We're crazy here, so.
I think we've been pretty wildly happy with the Cal Chamber. The price is right here. They have a lot of different support with it, and of course I have no idea what anything costs because, well, I'm just an attorney, but it must not be too bad here. So I think we're getting our money's worth.
I think they're good, and for those of you who are thinking about doing like an employee handbook, I think Cal Chamber has probably one of the better reasonably priced employee handbooks. It's a software, it's an online version. You create it and they ask you a bunch of questions. What I like about it is the laws that apply to you depend on the number of employees and where you're doing the work. So there's a somewhat customized that. There are some things I like to change in it, but if you were just looking, hey, I need a handbook, I need to get this out, I like the Cal Chamber version. People often ask, when do I need a handbook? Certainly if you have 5 or more employees, you want to have a handbook. Less than that, it really kind of depends. We do have a question about using flex time. Can an employee work 6 hours one day and 10 hours the next day without incurring overtime? Possibly. What we're really talking about is there's what's called makeup time, where if the employee has an appointment and they can't work their normal schedule, and so now they need to work, they want to work more hours the next day, they can do that. It should come from the employee. The request should be in writing. The employee cannot work more than 11 hours on the makeup day, and the work has to be made up in the same work week. So whatever your work week is, if it's Sunday through Saturday, Monday through Sunday, Wednesday through Tuesday, whatever it is, they have to take the time off and make it up within the same work week. Now, another thing people may consider doing is an alternative work week. The standard work week is 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. You can and anything over that you have to pay overtime. You can have an alternative work week if you go through the proper process that allows you to work up to like 10 hours a day, 4 days a week. So you can work 4 10s, or you can work 9 hours a day for 4 days, and then whatever it is, the extra hours on the fourth day without incurring overtime. But there's a process you have to go through. You have to put it to a vote to all the affected employees. You have to send notification to the labor commissioner. It's usually about at least a 14 to 30-day process. So it's just because employees say, hey, we want to do this, doesn't mean you can do it. But that flex time might be exactly what you're looking for, as far as, hey, we don't want them to have to work 8 hours a day. We think 6 hours a day is a much better. Let's do 6 hours a day, and we're going to do it 6 days a week.
Right. I mean, part of what we're looking at doing is that, we have certain hours that we need them to be available, for the attorneys and the other staff members and all of that. But past that, personally, I don't give a darn when they get their work done. Just, I want them to get their work done.
Mm-hmm.
Personally, as long as it doesn't, break the law or whatever. If they want to do their work 10 hours one day and 4 the next, that's fine. But what you're telling me is that if I understand this, is that in some ways it needs to be initiated by the employee.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we're talking about hourly employees. So a salaried attorney, we don't have to worry about that. But if we have even sometimes a paralegal, particularly if they're being paid hourly, you really would want them to limit themselves to 8 hours a day, no more than 40 hours a week. If on occasion, hey, look, my son's got a baseball game. I guess they don't do baseball right now, but they've got a social distancing game where they can be in their social bubble. I don't know.
Yes.
That we need to attend to tomorrow. Can I work a couple extra hours this week or today so I can take those hours off early? Sure, you can do it that
way. Okay, that's useful.
I mean, those are kind of the highlights and the high points and the things to consider when having somebody work from home. Looks like we got another question. I'm happy to answer whatever questions. What if an exempt employee wants to work 4 10-hours a day? So if they are exempt, meaning usually it means they're getting paid a salary and they're performing exempt duties, it doesn't matter if they want to work 4 hours, 4 10-hour days, or 7. They can work 7 days in a row because they're exempt. Means we don't have to pay overtime. So then it's just a consideration of, does this work for this job or this person? Let's say I'm an attorney, so I'm clearly exempt, but my job is to take all of the initial client intake. So anytime that phone rings and it's a potential client, I'm going to spend 10 to 15 minutes with that person, and I have to be available 9 to 5 Monday through Friday. Well, I'm exempt, so I only want to work 4 days a week. If that doesn't work for my employer is not obligated to do that, unless, like I said, if it's like, hey, my doctor is saying I can't, I have to go in for chemotherapy every Friday, so I can't do it, or I've got some other medical condition that requires an accommodation, then we have to look at whether or not we have to provide that accommodation.
Actually makes sense.
Yeah.
So reasonable accommodations, okay? And I have to tell you, we're not the only offices that have dealt with this, because we're actually very active with other pool trusts. And I know we got this from other pool trust administrators, where they're actually the employee working at home, or even the administrator working at home, is actually being more productive, and they're asking, what do I really have to come back?
Mm-hmm.
We're getting back to reasonable accommodations here with the virus. Like, for instance, folks that are over 65 apparently are more susceptible to the virus than folks that are not. So, for instance, is that a situation where the employee can demand to work at home and I'm not coming back in?
Yeah,
Or where, there's
that's a
kind of
great,
a line there, isn't there?
that's a great question. And that actually, um, it's a little bit more complicated. So, and we're coming with a lot of situations right now where as people are starting to open up, where you have employees say, hey, look, I'm concerned. I don't want to come into work because I'm afraid I'm going to get sick. And there's kind of a multi-step process that we have to go through because we have to figure out, first of all, why don't you want to come to work? If they say, because I have a medical condition and my doctor is telling me I shouldn't, okay, then get us a doctor's note and we'll work through that like we would any other accommodation. You know, is this a reasonable request? How is this going to work? Can we accommodate that request, and how long is that going to be for? That's one separate issue. Another is there's 6 different possible reasons that somebody could qualify for emergency paid sick leave. That was that in a way in the beginning I talked about the federal government passed this Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which created an emergency paid sick leave for 6 different reasons. It could be if you're required to stay home because of a shelter in place, or you're quarantined by your doctor, or you have to care for somebody who's been quarantined or is in a shelter in place, or if you're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and are awaiting a test, or if you have to care for a child whose school has closed as a result of COVID, or their child care is closed as a result of COVID. If it's one of those reasons, then we may have to give them up to 2 weeks of paid sick leave, and in one instance, up to 12 weeks. So we have to ask that question, why do you want to stay at home? If it's because of their medical condition, okay, we need a doctor's note. If it's one of these 6 reasons, then we have to kind of go through a little process there. Oftentimes they're just saying, look, I'm concerned, I don't want to get sick. I'm over the age of 65, I'm an asthmatic, I have MS, it puts me at a compromise. So if they're saying it's something to do with health, then I'd say, look, well, if a doctor recommends that you not come into work, get us that doctor's note. If it's just that you are concerned, well, then I say, let's go through all the things that we're doing to keep a safe work environment. And I'm assuming, of course, that you don't really want to grant the person the time off or the ability to work from home. Like, no, we really want you to come in. So we've established it's not a medical condition. It's not because of one of these emergency paid sick leaves. Then we go through, these are all the things that we are doing to keep the place safe. We're maintaining 6-foot social distancing. We're staggering the hours. We're giving masks and gloves, and there's hand sanitizers. We're limiting customers from coming in. And when customers do come in, we make them go through this questionnaire. We're asking employees to self-monitor their temperature every single day to make sure that they're not having a fever and that they report if they're experiencing any symptoms. All these kind of protocols that we're doing to keep the place safe. After you go through that, say, now that I've gone through that, does that alleviate your concerns? If they say yes, great. Most often they're going to say no, in which case we say, okay, is there anything that we can do that would alleviate your concerns? If they say yes and they identify something, consider it. Hey, maybe they've come up with a new way. Maybe they say, look, I'll come to the office, but I'll come in at 8 p.m. and I'll work till 6 a.m. or whatever it is. I just don't want to be there when anybody else is there. Well, maybe that'll work. Maybe it won't. More often they may say, no, there's nothing you can do. Then you say, well, we're not going to force you to come into work. It's not going to be paid time off, and you probably are not eligible for unemployment insurance, because if work is available for you and you don't have a medical reason not to perform the work, you're probably not going to get unemployment insurance. But we're not going to fire you because you don't think it's safe. But if there's something that we could do that could make it safer for you, let us know. Other than that, just let us know when you're ready to come back to work. Let us know. Now, you are going to have to find somebody to do that job. So you go out and you find somebody to do the job. And if that employee ever comes back and says, hey, I'm feeling comfortable to come back to work, we can now evaluate, do we have a position? Our preference would be to bring them back to work, but technically they have quit. If you have work available and they're not doing it, they have quit. So if that happens, I would pay out any of their accrued vacation that they have on the books. You want to pay that out. Any final wages, you want to pay that out. You treat it as though it is a termination of the employment. There was a question, they wanted me to review the process of implementing an
You can see
alternative.
we're getting a lot of traction on that, Robert.
Yeah. And I do have, I'm not going to send it to Amy, but I do have, if you want to reach out to me directly, robert@nuddleman.com. Again, robert@nuddleman.com. I have kind of a worksheet that I've created on how to go through that process. Essentially, you initially have to present to the employees, hey, we want to think about doing an alternative work week. This is what the schedule is going to look like. You have to have an informal meeting where you can answer questions. Then you have to allow them have a secret ballot that they can just put names into a shoebox or whatever, or yes, no. If that passes by at least 2/3 of the affected employees, then you can adopt it, and you have to send notification to the labor commissioner that they have adopted this alternative work week and it is now registered. You can go to the labor commissioner's website now and you can search how many of these are in there and what companies' names to see. Once it's adopted, it's adopted. And unless 2/3 of the employees vote to get rid of it, it's there. And you could even have it be flexible where, first of all, the affected employees, it could be all paralegals, all attorneys, all administrative staff, everybody in this office. So you can kind of change what it is. And sometimes all the affected employees are one employee. But once it passes, any new employees coming into that position, they can work that alternative work week. And you could even set it up where you have the option. You can work on an alternative work week or you can work the regular work week. You don't, just because it's passed, I can still provide you that flexibility. But it's really a flexibility for the employee. There's another question about if school is out and an employee cannot find child daycare and they have to stay home all summer, what happens then? That is actually one of the instances that may apply under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. It's one of the reasons for which an employee may get up to 12 weeks of paid time off. It's paid at 2/3 of their wages. The first 2 weeks is as emergency paid sick leave. The following 10 weeks are under this expanded Family Medical Leave Act. There are a couple of exceptions. Under the California law, it only applies if you have 500 or fewer employees. So I'm assuming that applies to everybody that's listening to this. But in certain cities, San Francisco, San Jose, I can't remember if Oakland has passed it. They've actually passed a law saying, no, it applies even if you're if you're over 500 employees. There can be certain exceptions where you can seek out an exemption if it's going to create really essentially make it so you may not be able to be in business. An employer can seek an exemption, or if you're for certain first responders. But this is reason number 5 under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act that would allow them to get the paid time off, which is I'm unable to work because my child, their school has closed down or their child care is unavailable due to COVID. If they close down for some other reason, like right now, schools are closed down because it's summer school. So that's not a valid reason. But if normally, yes, in the summertime, when school is out, I send them over to child care, but child care is not available because the child care is closed due to COVID, then that emergency paid sick leave would apply. If they are unable to work. If they're able to work from home, then they're able to work from home. And so that's different. And you may have a situation where normally I work 8 hours a day. When my kids are there, I can get 4 hours in, but the other 4 hours, I got to take care of my kids, and I'm just not going to be able to work. So in that instance, you pay them for 4 hours of the work that they're doing, and the other 4 hours they get as this emergency paid sick leave and this expanded Family Medical Leave Act. Now, that can be very harsh. Hey, I got to pay out this person's regular wages, or really it's 2/3. How am I going to cover that? All of that money under that emergency paid sick leave and the expanded Family Medical Leave, you get back as a dollar for dollar tax credit when you do your quarterly filing. So, and first of all, never take my tax advice. I've said this before. I've screwed up TurboTax twice. I'm good at screwing up taxes. But so whenever you pay an employee, there's a certain amount you withhold from their paycheck, and you're going to be sending that to the federal government, I think, quarterly. And there's a certain amount that you contribute as the employer share and you send to the federal government. FUTA and SSI and all that kind of Social Security, all that kind of stuff. if I normally going to send, say, $10,000 to the federal government for those taxes, but I've paid $2,000 out in this emergency paid sick leave, I now only have to send $8,000. So I get a dollar for dollar credit. And if the amount of the credit would be insufficient to cover it, you can actually ask for an emergency advance from the federal government, and they're supposed to process it fairly quickly, and you can get that money quickly so that that employee can have the pay.
Wow.
And that would be a protected leave too. So you wouldn't want to fire somebody because they're needing to take that extra time off.
So Robert, I've got a question. We have lots of people that are racking up lots of sick time now and then lots of vacation time. I would say this is probably a pretty lousy time to take a vacation. But, the issue is going to be, and, I always find myself in a weird situation because before I was an attorney, I was actually a labor representative, and now I am, the employer. So it's kind of a weird
You
position.
are the man. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, right. And sometimes it's hard for me to adjust. I actually prefer being labor, but now I'm management. Here, it's amazing how it changes your head around a little bit. But going back to this, okay, I've got my employees. They're just racking up. By the way, for those watching, I love them all, so don't take this wrong. I'm talking hypothetically, but they're racking up all this time, and the concern is that eventually they're going to have to take it. Now, can I, as an employer, force them to take their vacation during this time? And the problem is, if you were to take a vacation, where the hell are you going to go?
Well, it depends. I want to differentiate between paid sick leave and vacation because they are different. Paid vacation is a wage. Typically they earn it as they go. Every hour or every week or every pay period, every month, however you have it set up, they get a small amount of their annual vacation. So if I work 6 months, I've earned 6 months worth of whatever vacation I would on an annual basis. That is a wage. It has to be paid out at the time of the employment ends. Paid sick leave is not a wage. That is separate. It should only be used for paid sick leave, certain qualifying reasons, if they're sick or a family member is sick. That's not a wage. They only get it if they or somebody's been sick and they have the time on the books. If they quit or they're fired, they don't get paid that out. Now, if you allow employees to use their paid sick leave for vacation, you just turn their vacation into paid sick leave. California, you have to provide paid sick leave. You do not have to provide paid vacation. But once you provide paid vacation and they've earned it, now those obligations come in. So there are certain leaves, certain types of leaves where you can require them to use paid sick leave first, and you can allow them to use their paid vacation. And each leave is different. It depends on how many employees, like the emergency paid sick leave, this Families First Coronavirus Response Act I was talking about. That one actually says you cannot require the employee to use any of their PTO or paid sick leave prior to using this new federal emergency paid sick leave. And by the way, this emergency paid sick leave that the federal government has is set to expire December 31st. They could renew it, but right now it's kind of like it was an emergency situation. So depending on if let's say they just have all this time up, they're not using that time. You can always, as the employer, you can always buy out their vacation at any point in time. You can say, hey, you've got 2 weeks of vacation on the books. Here's a check for 2 weeks. They don't have to take the time off. You pay them out. You've now brought that liability down to zero. Hopefully, with your paid vacation or your PTO policy, you have a max accrual so that they're not accruing beyond a certain point. Let's say I get 2 weeks per year. I accrue that over the course of the year at a specified rate such that at the end of the year, I will have 2 full weeks. If I don't use it, it's going to roll over and it's going to continue to accrue. And if I don't put a cap on that, all of a sudden I've been working here for 6 years and now all of a sudden I've got 12 weeks of paid time off that I'm going on vacation for 3 months. What are you going to do? So you want to put a cap. That cap should be at least 1.5 to 2 times what they can accrue in any single year. So if I can accrue 2 weeks in a year, you want to say, once I have accrued 4 weeks, I'm not going to accrue anymore. That prevents the vacation from getting too big. Now, a lot of employers have created what they call unlimited vacation, where, look, you can take as much vacation as you want. Just get the job done. That's all we care about. I am not a fan of those, but some employers like that. And so if they do it, we have to deal with it. The reason I don't like it is that it makes it real difficult. So, for example, if I become pregnant, aside from calling the Inquirer, which I think is still around, I'm entitled to up to 4 months of paid time, or excuse me, up to 4 months of unpaid time off while I'm disabled as a result of the pregnancy. And then I get another 12 weeks of unpaid time off while I bond with the child. So that's really 7 months of time off. It's unpaid for pregnancy. But if I have unlimited vacation, now you may be stuck paying me for 7 months. So that's one reason I don't like it, because I don't want to treat you differently because you have this disability or because you become pregnant, because now I'm subjecting myself to a discrimination claim.
Can we require them not to get pregnant?
Yeah, you can just tell them, don't get pregnant.
Okay.
We're a Catholic organization, so no, wait, that's not how it works. No, you cannot.
Okay, it's not going to work.
Um,
We have somebody who reworded my question more articulately here. So.
Can you make someone take a specific period of time off? Yeah. And I would say, no, you can't force them to take the particular time off. You could always buy out their time. I mean, I guess that's not true. I could say, you're not coming into work next week, and I'm paying out your vacation. I can certainly do that. It'd be kind of odd to do it that way, but I would try encouraging the employees so that, hey, you really want to take as much time. You want to take that time off. We're offering you that vacation because everybody needs to get away. You need that. You need to decompress. And if you don't, then, you're not going to be as efficient and you're not going to be happy. We always want our employees to be happy.
And I think that's a phenomenon that is going on right now, because I don't know about you, but this, staying in place, I wouldn't count that as a vacation, But on the other hand, you need a break from time to time, because, the problem sometimes that working from home is, and working like this is, a lot of times, at least for me, there's no defined, this is when you start and this is where you end. Here and I think that can lead to some really unhealthy environments, but
yeah, and I think it's important to tell, to make sure employees know that, no, we do want you to take those breaks, even if it's just take Friday, just know that that's your day, so that you're not going to answer your emails, your voicemail is going to be set to I'm not available. The question is, can you deny a vacation request? Yes, you can always deny a vacation unless they want to use that for, let's say, I need the time off as an accommodation for a disability. But you can always feel free to say, no, I'm not going to let you take vacation during this time. Vacation is always subject to the needs of the employer. Paid sick leave, not necessarily. You may have to allow them to use the paid sick leave. Any other questions? Like I said, I can do this all day, so.
Well, I could do this for another 14 minutes and then I have to go on to something else, but let's see if last few things as we go through this. And Robert, maybe you want to, or Amy, can you put up Robert's information again here for the screen? And by the way, for our YouTube followers, if you have any questions, probably the best thing to do would be, I'm actually watching the comments on the Facebook channel, so feel free. Once again, Robert is a very well-known employment attorney, and he actually does charge real live money here. So this is the time to get some of your questions answered.
And we did get a question that came in about what about company shutdowns? Can we allow employees to take time off without pay or to take vacation? Yeah. Couple rules on that. And this is an area where some employers, I think, made some mistakes early on in the shelter in place, which is what they were calling a furlough, which isn't really a furlough. So first of all, by the way, somebody is saying that the email to Amy bounced back. So make sure and put in the chat room again, the Amy, double check, make sure you have the right email.
Which is amy@gspt.org.
Yeah, so double check it. Anyways, so can we do a mandatory shutdown? So if hourly employees, you just pay them for the hours that they work. If they're not working, then you're not paying them. The salaried employees, you have to pay them if they perform any work during a work week. So if I show up to work on Monday and you do a company shutdown Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I still get paid my full salary. There can be some exceptions, but essentially if it's a company shutdown, you have to pay exempt employees for the whole work week. So if you're going to do a company shutdown, you want to do it usually in full work weeks. Otherwise, you're not really saving anything other than on the hourly employees. And you typically would allow employees to use their paid vacation, but I know some employers that say, okay, from Christmas to New Year's, we are shutting down, and if you have accrued vacation, you will use your accrued vacation during that time. And yes, I think you can force employees to use that accrued vacation. Potentially, even if you do a partial week shutdown for your exempt employees, you could say you have to use your vacation. I think that's dicier because you're the one who's forcing the shutdown. And I'm not talking about like if you were shut down because of a safety issue, there's down power lines or inclement weather that prevents you from coming in, then I think there's some exceptions. But if you're saying, hey, look, we're going to shut down. I was mentioning some employers made mistakes when the shelter in place first came into effect with furloughs versus a layoff. They were saying, oh, we're just going to furlough people and we'll bring you back when we know what's going on. The problem is a layoff means we have no work for you. Well, if I furlough you, so you're working 0 hours and I don't have a date for you to come back, what's the difference between that and a layoff? There isn't. The labor commissioner takes the perspective that a furlough, if somebody's working 0 hours and you have not given them a time to come back, you haven't said you're going to be coming back to work on X date, then that employee has been laid off, which triggers your obligation to pay all final wages and including any accrued vacation. So unless the furlough, a true furlough really is kind of a reduction in hours. So instead of working 40 hours, you're only going to work 5 hours a week. That's different. That's fine. They're still working. But if they're working 0 hours and you've not given them a specific date to return, or if the date they're returning expands beyond one pay period, that is a layoff that could trigger your obligation to pay all wages earned. I've got a question. What if the shutdown for the holiday, but the employee doesn't have vacation? Do I have to pay the employee for that holiday? It depends on your policies. The law does not require employers to provide paid holidays. If your policy says we will give you a paid holiday and the holiday comes up, then you have to pay it because they were employed at the time of the holiday. There are some employers that only provide paid holidays for full-time employees or regular employees or employees that have worked a certain number of months, years, weeks, etc. So normally you don't have to pay for a holiday unless your policies say you will. And then if the policies say you do, then you have to follow what your employee said, what your policy says.
So Robert, we were discussing, before we went live, how this virus has affected folks in all sorts of different ways. So, I mean, we're very fortunate at the Golden State Pool Trust and the Dale Law Firm that we actually have been doing very well with it. some, and I'm assuming everybody that's watching for the most part is either an attorney or a fiduciary or an allied professional, or otherwise, what the hell are you doing on this call? But
Because they want to hear me, Dale. Because they want to hear me.
yeah, they want to hear you. But but here's the thing: I've got a friend, and I can't imagine being in this position that they've been adversely affected, and he's trying to do everything he can do to hang on, and he himself hasn't taken a draw for several months.
Mm-hmm.
But what he's kind of putting out to his employees, which none of them are on the line that I can see, is that either you take a 20% cut, or I'm going to lay you off, which I think means fire you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this has got, I can't imagine being in that situation, and thank God, knock on wood, that we're not faced with that. But it would seem like there would be a number of landmines in that kind of situation.
Well, that actually comes, what I've done a slightly different version of that is we're having to do cost cutting. So we're doing a reduction in hours for employees across the board. That's fine for hourly employees, but not necessarily for salaried employees. Because remember, I said if you're paid a salary and you are exempt from overtime, then whether you work 10 hours or 110 hours, I'm paying you the same amount. So just reducing the hours of a salaried person doesn't change my obligation to pay a salary. Now, I can reduce that salary. I can say, look, we're going to reduce you down to X, from Y, now we're going to pay you X.
Kind of like take this or.
Yeah, I mean, and they can quit, and they may be eligible for unemployment insurance. The rule of thumb kind of is if somebody gets a reduction in wages of unemployment insurance. That's true during the COVID-19 crisis with the shelter in place, because partial unemployment is better than none. What I can tell you is also there is sorry, I'm looking at two things at once. Sorry. There is a work share program that I know some clients might have taken advantage of through the EDD. What happens is if I'm working full-time and I am now only working part-time, I can get partial unemployment insurance benefits. The amount I get is like this. It's a weird calculation. It's a very small, tiny amount if I even qualify, which is particularly difficult if you're a higher wager. If the employer participates in the work share program, which it's fairly easy to do if you go through the process, the employee actually can get a greater portion of the wages of unemployment insurance through the work share program. So it's a little bit of a benefit for the employee as far as how that calculation is. And it's a pretty weird calculation, quite frankly.
I think we're at a point where we have to take that last question up there and do our goodbyes.
Sure. If an employee exhausts their sick leave and their vacation time, and then they get sick, well, then they take the time off without pay. I mean, that's if they don't have any more paid time off, they don't qualify for any more paid time off, they get sick. And that was actually one of the things that we had some people who were saying, hey, I want to use this emergency paid sick leave because I don't want to come into work because of the shelter in place. And there are sometimes when, okay, would this apply or would it not? And I would advise, yeah, absolutely, you could take it. You may also decide you want to not take that emergency paid sick leave now, but you want to maybe use it for later. Herb, by the way, has raised his hand, so I don't know if we can pull him on to ask a quick question.
Oh, Herb's special, so okay.
Yeah, I know. So yeah, if otherwise, if you don't have any more paid sick leave, then it's gone. So I don't know if we can.
I can turn his sound on.
Herb, you're allowed to talk.
Yeah, Herb, speak.
Trying to unmute you. Hold on.
Oh, here we go.
You may have clicked on your end. Oh, there you go. Go ahead, Herb.
Does that make sense?
I didn't hear anything you said.
Okay, sorry. So what I was asking is, can you require employees to come into the office at all during COVID-19? So for instance, they've been sheltering in place, but it's like hey, I need you to come in today or this day or something like that?
Yeah. So the first step is, can we require them to come in? Depends on, are they subject to, I'm going to mute you again, just so you know, are they subject to the shelter place? I'm assuming that that you are an essential business and this worker is essential, at least for the purpose of, hey, I need you to come in today. And if that's the case, then yeah, you can require them to come in. If they say, I don't want to come in, then we have to go through that analysis I talked about before. Okay, why don't you want to come in? Do you have a doctor's note that says you can't, you shouldn't come in? If not, what are your concerns? Okay, if those are your concerns, then this is what we're doing to make sure it's safe. Is there anything else we can do? No, there's nothing else we can do. Okay, and then if they say they're still not going to come in, am I going to fire that person because of it? Probably not. But I would probably want to work with you to come up with a way that we can really strongly encourage that person to come in.
Great. Well,
That brings us to 1
I
o'clock.
wasn't sure how long we would go, but we used our time. Robert, as always, you are a wealth of information and all that. Here, I do want to mention, about 6 months ago, you did a great program for us that really focused a whole lot on having caregivers at home and a lot of that, but which just kind of leads us up to, for those of you that are not familiar with what we're doing, this is a program with the Golden State Pool Trust. Normally, this is an exception. This was an open forum because we had really no idea what the hell we were going to talk about, but I think it worked out pretty good.
I still don't know what I was talking about.
Well, that's okay, but you're convincing, so it works for me, man. Anyway, we have probably at this point about a dozen hours of MCLE programs. They're absolutely free. To get the information about the MCLE programs you want to, and once again, email Amy, which is amy@gspt.org. Here, and if you do that, once again, we'll send you a link to where the programs are, and also put you on the list so you know about future programs that are coming up. Also, we're working on new programs, always working on new programs. So if there's something you'd really like to see or hear, whatever, we'll do our best to do this. About half of our programs will deal with public benefits, but the other half we're dealing with all the different things that, not only do we have to deal with when we're dealing with persons with disabilities, but also trying to make sure that we have a good working environment that works for our employers and our employees, because obviously they're important to all of this. So with that, the other thing that I will mention, we're going to be putting out some information, just a heads up. For those of you that know me, I know that I am a terrible pessimist when it comes to disability programs, which works for me, and unfortunately, I'm almost always right. I wish I wasn't. There's right now, the state budget is really focused on a lot of the social service programs that we supplement. And for instance, for programs that are focused on intellectual and developmental disabilities, here, they're facing between a 7.5% and 15% cut, which is really going to devastate that community. So keep an eye out. Hopefully we're not only good fiduciaries, but we're also good citizens, and obviously we want to help with those programs. With that, Robert, I want to thank you once again. You did an excellent job as always. Can we just put up real quick Robert's information as we close out here? And with that, any last words of wisdom? Hopefully not about flex schedules, because I think
stay safe. Common sense usually will rule the day. So when think about what can we do, communication is key. Wash your hands, stay 6 feet apart, and enjoy your social bubble.
Okay, I want to thank you so much. Here's our information from Robert, or ask any private fiduciary, and they probably will be able to find the information for you. Robert, thank you so much for sharing this valuable information. And with that, happy advocating and good afternoon.
Thank you.